Queen Amina loved sitting by the river. It was her favorite place, a spot where she could escape the palace's hustle and bustle and feel a connection with nature. The water was calm, the air was cool, and the soothing sound of the river brought her peace like nothing else. She often went there to think about her life, her responsibilities as queen, and her dreams. On this particular day, her belly was big, very big. She was 9 months pregnant, and the baby could come at any time. She sat on the soft grass near the riverbank, enjoying the tranquility, when suddenly, a sharp pain pierced through her abdomen. It was so sudden that she gasped and clutched her stomach, her heart racing with fear and anticipation. "Oh no! The baby is coming," she cried out, her voice trembling as the pain intensified. She looked around desperately, hoping someone would hear her cries for help. "Help me! Somebody, please help," she shouted, but the area was deserted. There was no one in sight. She was completely alone. The pain grew stronger, making it difficult for her to move. With each contraction, she felt her strength draining away. She fell to the ground, her body trembling, and began to cry and groan as the pain became unbearable. In that lonely moment, by the quiet river, Queen Amina gave birth to her child all by herself. It was the hardest and most painful thing she had ever done. Her cries echoed across the water as she struggled to bring the baby into the world. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the baby arrived. She let out a weak gasp of relief, her body collapsing from exhaustion. With shaking hands, she lifted the baby and looked down at the tiny life she had just brought into the world. She expected to feel joy and love, but instead, she froze in shock. Her eyes widened, and her heart skipped a beat. The baby was white. Not light-skinned, not pale, but completely white, like freshly fallen snow. Queen Amina could not believe what she was seeing. She stared at the baby, her mind racing with confusion and fear. "How is this possible?" she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. She and her husband, King Uju, were both dark-skinned. How could she give birth to a white baby? Her chest tightened as panic set in. "The king will never believe me," she thought, her hands trembling. "He will think I betrayed him. He will think I cheated." Tears welled up in her eyes as she held the baby close to her chest. "What will I do? What will I say?" King Uju was a proud and harsh man, known for his arrogance and quick temper. He was not someone who forgave easily. People feared him, even within the palace walls. Queen Amina knew that if the king believed she had been unfaithful, he would punish her severely. He might even take her life. She could already imagine the look of anger and betrayal on his face if he saw the baby. Her hands shook as she tried to think of a solution. "I cannot take you to the palace," she whispered to the baby, her voice breaking with sorrow. "The king will never accept you. He will not let you live." Her heart felt heavy with grief and fear. She knew she had no choice but to make an unthinkable decision. With tears streaming down her face, Queen Amina wrapped the baby in a soft cloth she had brought with her. She stood up, her legs weak and trembling, and walked slowly to the edge of the river. The water was calm, its surface reflecting the golden hues of the setting sun. She placed the baby gently in the water, her hands lingering for a moment as she struggled to let go. "I am sorry," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I am so sorry." She pushed the baby into the current and watched as the river carried the tiny bundle away. Her tears fell like rain, her heart breaking with every passing second. She stayed there for a moment, watching the baby drift farther and farther away until he was out of sight. Then, she wiped her tears and took a deep breath. She knew she couldn't return to the palace empty-handed. She had to act quickly. Queen Amina left the river and made her way to the orphanage located in a remote corner of the kingdom. The journey was long and difficult, but she pushed through, her mind focused on her plan. When she arrived, an old woman greeted her at the door. The woman's eyes were kind, but she could sense the queen's desperation. "Please," Queen Amina begged, her voice filled with urgency. "I need a baby. I will pay you anything, but you must promise never to tell anyone I was here." The old woman nodded silently and disappeared into the orphanage. A few moments later, she returned with a healthy baby boy. He was dark-skinned, with bright, curious eyes and a calm demeanor. Queen Amina took the baby in her arms and felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Thank you," she said, pressing a bag of gold coins into the woman's hands. "Remember, you must never speak of this." The old woman nodded again, her lips sealed. When Queen Amina returned to the palace with the baby, the entire kingdom erupted in celebration. Servants clapped and cheered as she entered the gates, holding the baby close to her chest. The people sang songs of joy, and the sound of drums filled the air. The king himself smiled proudly, his stern face softening for the first time in ages. Everyone was happy. They named the baby Orange, and the kingdom rejoiced at the arrival of the royal heir. But behind her forced smile, Queen Amina was not happy. Her heart felt heavy with guilt and sorrow. She held the baby and played the role of a loving mother, but she couldn't stop thinking about the child she had left behind. Her secret was safe for now, but she knew that secrets had a way of surfacing. One day, this secret would come back to haunt her, and when it did, everything would change. Meanwhile, the baby Queen Amina had abandoned floated down the river, his small cries echoing in the stillness of the evening. His tiny body was wrapped in soft cloth, but the water began to seep through, chilling him to the bone. He cried louder, his voice filled with sadness and fear. But his mother was long gone, far from the riverbank where she had left him. As the current grew stronger, the baby began to sink. His small arms flailed as the water rose around him, pulling him under. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, a figure appeared in the water. It was a mermaid, her shimmering tail cutting through the river like a blade. Her name was Queen Mary, the wise and powerful ruler of the Mermaid Kingdom. Queen Mary had been swimming near the surface when she heard the baby's cries. She rushed to the scene, her heart aching at the sight of the helpless child. Who would leave such a beautiful baby here? She wondered aloud, her voice filled with sadness. She scanned the riverbank, hoping to find the baby's mother, but there was no one there. The baby's cries grew weaker as the water threatened to engulf him. Without hesitation, Queen Mary dove forward and scooped the baby into her arms. She cradled him gently, her long hair flowing around her like a curtain. "You are safe now," she whispered, holding him close. As she swam back to the safety of her underwater kingdom, Queen Mary noticed that the baby was struggling to breathe. His tiny chest heaved, and his face turned pale. "Oh no," she exclaimed, realizing that humans could not survive underwater. Thinking quickly, she leaned down and kissed the baby softly on his forehead. The kiss was magical, imbued with the power of the Mermaid Queen. The baby gasped and took a deep breath. Suddenly, his small legs shimmered and transformed into a shiny silver tail. His lungs adjusted, and he began to breathe easily underwater. Queen Mary smiled, her heart swelling with love. "You are one of us now," she said gently. She held the baby close and swam deeper into the ocean, ready to raise him as her own. "I am the king, I make the decisions." The advisor quickly bowed his head. "Yes, Your Majesty," he said, stepping back. The room went silent. The other advisors looked at each other but said nothing, they were too afraid to speak. The king rolled up the letter and placed it in a small glass bottle. He called for his messenger. "Take this to the river, deliver it to the mermaids," he commanded. The messenger bowed and left with the bottle. When he reached the river, the messenger pulled out a small flute. He blew into it, and a soft, clear sound echoed over the water. Then he threw the bottle into the river and hurried away. A few minutes after the messenger left, some mermaids swimming nearby saw the bottle floating in the water. One swam closer and picked it up. She turned it around in her hands, curious. "What is this?" she asked. "It's from the humans," said another mermaid. "We should take it to Queen Mary." The mermaids swam quickly to their kingdom under the water. They entered the royal palace and handed the bottle to their queen. Queen Mary, the wise and strong leader of the mermaids, took the bottle and opened it carefully. She unrolled the letter and began to read. As she read, her face grew hard with anger. "What a proud, arrogant king," she said to herself. "He doesn't even ask for his son, he commands me. Even if he begged, I would never return Kello. Never." Her voice echoed in the grand, sparkling hall of the mermaid palace. She stared at the letter for a moment, her anger boiling inside her. Then, with one sharp motion, she tore the letter in two. The pieces floated down through the water, drifting softly to the floor. What Queen Mary didn't know was that Kello had been watching her. He saw everything, the letter, her anger, and the moment she ripped it apart. His heart pounded as he stepped forward slowly. "Mother," Kello said, his voice quiet but firm. Queen Mary turned quickly, surprised to see him. "Kello," she said gently. "Why are you here? How long have you been watching?" "I saw everything," Kello said, his bright white skin glowing in the dim light. "Who sent that letter? What did it say?" Queen Mary took a deep breath. She swam closer to him, placing her hands gently on his shoulders. "It was from a human king," she said softly. "The king of the world above. He claims you are his son." Kello's eyes widened in shock. "His son," he said. "But that can't be true. I've never even met him. How can I be his son?" Queen Mary's expression softened, and she began to explain. 15 years ago, I found you floating on the river. You were just a tiny baby. You were crying, and you were sinking into the water. I saved you. I brought you here and raised you as my own. Since then, you have been part of this family." Kello's heart felt heavy. "If I'm his son, why was I left in the river?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Did my real parents not want me?" Queen Mary's heart ached for him. She gently stroked his cheek. "I don't know why they left you," she said. "But I know this, you are loved here. You are my son. You are part of this family, and nothing will change that." Kello stood in silence, his thoughts swirling. He felt thankful for the life he had here. Finally, he looked up at Queen Mary and said firmly, "I don't want to go. This is my home. You are my mother." Queen Mary smiled and pulled him into a hug. "You will not go," she said. "I will not let that king take you." Just then, Princess Decca swam into the hall, her eyes wide with worry. She had overheard their conversation and quickly swam to Kello. She threw her arms around him. "You're not leaving," she cried. "You're my brother. I won't let anyone take you away." Kello hugged her tightly. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "This is my family, and I belong here." Queen Mary watched them, her eyes full of love but also determination. She swam forward and placed a hand on both of their shoulders. "Kello is staying," she said. "Let the king send more letters, let him threaten me with his armies. Kello belongs here, and I will protect him with my life." But deep down, Queen Mary felt uneasy. She knew the king would not stop. She could feel it. This was only the beginning. A great storm was coming, one that would test the strength of both the land and the sea. The third day was almost over. The sun was setting, painting the sky red and gold. The air was tense, and both sides were ready for what was coming. Queen Mary and her mermaids prepared themselves deep in the water, their weapons sharp and their hearts steady. On land, King Uja's soldiers stood firm, waiting for his command. Finally, the moment came. The king walked to the river, his steps heavy and full of anger. His armor shone in the fading sunlight, and his men followed behind him, silent but ready for war. The river rippled, and Queen Mary rose from the water. Her presence was strong and commanding, like the river itself. The king's men and Queen Mary's warriors watched in complete silence. The tension in the air was thick. It felt like the world itself was holding its breath. King Uja spoke first, his voice loud and full of rage. "This is your last chance," he said. "Return my son to me, or I will destroy you, your warriors, and this entire river." Queen Mary's eyes narrowed, but she stayed calm. "You arrogant king," she said, her voice steady. "Is this how you say thank you? I saved the child you call your son. Without me, he would not even be alive." The king's face grew red with anger, but he said nothing. Queen Mary continued. "You demand your son, but you left him to die. You do not deserve him." Her voice turned sharp. "No one wants to make deals with a man like you. But if you insist on taking him, you will have to be more respectful and thankful." King Uja's hands clenched into fists. "Enough of your words," he shouted. "Give me my son, or I will take him by force." Queen Mary stood tall, her voice unwavering. "Your pride ends here, King Uja. Let's settle this now. But we won't let innocent lives be lost in a fight that is ours to settle. This is between you and me." The king paused, his anger boiling over. Then, with a sharp motion, he drew his sword. The blade gleamed in the fading light. "So be it," he growled. Queen Mary stepped onto the riverbank, her movements smooth and powerful. As she emerged from the water, her tail shimmered and transformed into human legs. She reached for her own sword, long and glowing like the waves. Both sides, humans and mermaids, watched in complete silence. They held their breath, their eyes fixed on the two leaders. The king pointed his sword at Queen Mary. "You will regret this," he said through clenched teeth. Queen Mary raised her sword high, her expression calm but fierce. "Your pride blinds you, King Uja. Today you will learn that even a king cannot control everything." The river was quiet, the air still. Everyone knew this fight would decide everything. And then, with the sun sinking low, the battle began. As the days turned to weeks, the two kingdoms began to rebuild their trust. Queen Mary sent gifts from the underwater kingdom, rare treasures from the ocean depths that symbolized unity and peace. King Uja, true to his word, implemented fairer laws, ensuring justice for all his people. His council of advisors, once ruled by fear, now worked harmoniously, sharing ideas and building a kingdom where everyone thrived. Prince Callow became a bridge between the two worlds. He traveled frequently to the Mermaid Kingdom, where he was welcomed as a beloved figure. The mermaids, inspired by his bravery and humility, worked alongside humans to clean the rivers and restore balance to the environment. This collaboration not only healed the damage caused by the war but also brought prosperity to both kingdoms. Queen Mary often visited the human kingdom, her majestic presence a reminder of the strength found in forgiveness and compassion. She and King Uja shared stories and exchanged wisdom, learning from each other's experiences. Their newfound friendship became a beacon of hope for their people. Years later, when King Uja grew too old to rule, he officially passed the crown to Prince Callow in a grand ceremony that united both kingdoms. Humans and mermaids gathered to witness the historic moment, their cheers echoing across the land and sea. Callow stood tall, his glowing presence a symbol of harmony. As King Callow, he made his first decree, to establish a council with members from both kingdoms, ensuring that decisions would reflect the needs of all. Under his leadership, the two worlds flourished like never before. In the final years of Queen Mary's life, she and King Callow often shared quiet moments reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. "You were always meant for greatness," Queen Mary said with pride. Callow smiled and replied, "It was because of the love and wisdom you gave me." The tale of Prince Callow, the boy from the river who became the king of two worlds, became a legend passed down through generations. It reminded everyone of the power of humility, forgiveness, and unity. The two kingdoms lived in peace, their bond unbreakable, a testament to the strength found in understanding and compassion. And so, the story ends, not with a battle, but with a lasting peace, a reminder that even the greatest divisions can be healed when love and humility prevail. The story teaches us that forgiveness and love are stronger than hate and revenge. True strength comes from understanding others and choosing kindness, even when faced with pain or betrayal. It reminds us that unity and compassion can heal broken relationships and bring harmony to communities. By letting go of anger and working together, we can create a brighter future for everyone. Love and mutual respect are the keys to overcoming even the toughest challenges in life. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment. Make sure to subscribe to African Tales by Zuri for more amazing stories filled with life lessons and inspiration. Your support helps us bring more beautiful tales to life.